These videos take a long time to record and edit. It would mean a lot to me if you could leave a like and subscribe. If you enjoy this video, leave a comment about your favorite part. It will get pinned and hearted. Now let's get into the story. Is anyone there? Answer me if you can hear me. Luffy had been walking for about 3 hours shouting at me. While shouting, yet destroying his voice brought him no response during this time. To believe that there were really no other survivors on this island. Realizing that he had been the only one screaming for a while, he turned to the other 2 people who made up his group. Hey, you 2, would you mind helping me out a bit? I've been screaming to myself for over a quarter of an hour. Passing him without giving him the slightest glance, Law retorted, for the 20th time, stop screaming. Do you really want to alert all the monsters in the area? How do you want to find our friends if you don't shout? For the 20th time, use your eyes to find clues. Stopping, he crouched down and looked at the excrement that was on the ground. Examining them, he saw a few small pieces of bone inside. Then, inspecting the trunk of a tree, he saw small traces of scratches on the bark. This place seems to be the territory of a predator. But to see the size of the scratches in its excrement, it must not be more than a meter long. If it is alone, it will not represent threat to us. Getting up, he declared, using your brain, you may be able to find clues that can tell you whether humans have been here or not. And if so, we can find them without alerting the animals in the area. Then he started walking again. Using this method and traveling a great distance, we will be able to quickly survey this whole island and find out if we are alone here. Nevertheless, Luffy grabbed his arm before pointing at something behind the pair. I think we're going to have to wait a bit. Turning around, Law groaned, seeing Shirahoshi, who had just caught up with the 2 boys. Seeming to be having trouble breathing, she took long breaths, while she seemed to be exhausted. Sorry, she apologized. I've never used to walk so much. It's okay, Luffy assured her, seeing that she was doing her best. Let's take a little break. No way, Law retorted, continuing to walk. We still have a long way to go. Great fruit. Turning around, Law saw Luffy running towards a tree, before climbing up to its foliage to pick fruits resembling mangoes. Seeing him pick a piece of fruit and bite into it, Law began to growl. Too good. Hey, Trollo, you want one? Law let out another groan before sitting down on a stone. Seeing him sit down, Shirahoshi put her buttocks on the floor before heaving a sigh of relief. Sorry for that. Keeping silence, Law took back his computer and began to write various information. Meanwhile, Luffy came back to them with several fruits in his arms. I brought breakfast, he affirmed. I was really hungry. Then, he placed one of the fruits in front of Shirahoshi. Do you want one? 2H, thank you. Eating 3 more fruits, Luffy ended up slapping his chest, while something got stuck in his throat. Seeing him start to choke, Law sighed before punching him in the back. The shock unblocked Luffy's throat and allowed him to breathe again. Phew, thank you, Trollo. Simply throwing a pebble at him, the boy told him. Make yourself useful and go carve another mark for me. Aye, Luffy said, grabbing the pebble before heading for a log. Starting to bite into its fruit, Shirahoshi spotted Luffy carving an arrow into the trunk of the tree. Huh? Luffy said. Yeah, Weak Hoshi, the stewardess wondered. Hearing this, Law couldn't help but smile, enjoying, for the first time, Luffy giving people nicknames. Feeling belittled, Shirahoshi held back further sobs and finally asked in a small voice, why do you carve signs on the trees? We call it search area, Luffy told her. Search area? Yes, it consists of systematically leaving marks on our path so that we can turn around if necessary. That way, if for some reason or ours we have to return to the starting point, we will know which path to take. When he had finished carving an arrow into the bark of the tree, he pointed at something with his finger. Do you see that mountain over there? It was really huge and even had the top covered in mist. She looked a lot like the ones you could see in scary movies. Huh? Yes, it's roughly in the center of this island. Well, I'm not sure, since we can't see the whole island. Anyway, we're going to circle around in a spiral until what we reach. This way, we can be sure to cover the whole island and establish a large search area. This is the best way to find the plane or survivors. In addition, The arrows I leave show the direction we're going. So if people find them, they'll be able to follow us and find us. It's amazing, Shirahoshi affirmed. You are very well prepared for this kind of situation, Luffy said. Actually, I know all that from my grandfather, Luffy confessed, scratching the back of his head. During our survival games, he showed me this method, in case I got lost. And I decided to tell Trao about it, just before we broke camp. I'm just following his orders when he asks me to carve an arrow on the trunks. Oh, right. He must be very smart then. That's right, Luffy agreed, with a big smile. He's really surprising. He's a real nerd. Call me that again and you're dead. Then, closing his computer, Law stood up before affirming. It's best to take a walk around to inspect the surroundings. Before leaving, Straw Hat, you come with me. Huh? Luffy wondered, while Law's request seemed more like an obligation than a proposal. Where do you want us to go? Come on, he replied, walking off into the forest. Don't worry, Shiraya, we'll be right back. Okay, she said as she saw them leave and disappear into the forest. Why does he want to show me off? She wondered, anyway, displaying a suspicious look towards the boy. Is he planning to abandon me because he finds me useless? Suddenly, bushes started moving next to her and two creatures came out. Traveling a good 100 meters in the forest, Luffy followed Law, before he decided to stop. Trao, why did you want to see me alone? He wanted to know, glancing over my shoulder several times. It could be dangerous, especially since we left Wikoshi all alone. I don't know if you noticed, but I don't think she can defend herself. If she has a bad encounter, I wanted to put her away so I wouldn't hear her cry again for an hour. He told him, coldly. It's annoying. I have to admit that I don't appreciate hearing her cry. Luffy confessed. But why would she do it again? I know very well that she would still do it if I had told her what I am about to tell you. Huh? What do you want to tell me? Straw Hat, I don't want you to get your hopes up. Law affirmed. We have already been looking for more than 3 hours for a possible trace of a fourth survivor who would have survived the crash. So far, we have found nothing. Not even the slightest clue. So what? We have no idea what the distance we have just traveled is compared to the size of the island. If it is, the plane is not even 100 meters away. Either way, he's supposed to be on this island anyway. It's only a matter of time before we find him. Straw Hat, I think, indeed, that the plane is on this island. However, I prefer to warn you, even if we find the plane, there is a risk. A risk? What risk? I'm afraid. Everyone is dead. Freezing, Luffy's face betrayed his surprise. Finally, he pushed his lips enough to ask, what are you telling me again? I imagine you've seen the news about plane crashes before. These crashes are rare, but their fatality rate is close to 100%. So you better be prepared for the idea that others have always killed when the plane crashed. The fact that we are still alive is already a miracle. All dead. Don't say anymore. Don't say that kind of thing again. Straw Hat, be real. Immediately, Luffy grabbed his collar before banging his forehead against his and staring at him angrily. I forbid you to say such things. I refuse to believe it. My friends are not dead. Ace is not dead. Nobody who was on the plane is dead. Can you hear me? In response, Law slapped Luffy's arm to knock him back. Even if you hope for something, life doesn't always turn out the way you want it to. If I say that, it's to convince you to start worrying about our survival, rather than looking in vain for potential. Shut up. I don't want to hear any more about this. Let's search for them again and we'll keep going until we find them. Alive or dead, the matter is closed. With those words, Luffy turned and walked back. Come on, let's join Wikoshi. She must be worried sick. What Luffy didn't know, however, was that Shirahoshi was actually terrified. Sitting on the ground, she watched with concern two rodents that had just appeared in front of her. They both belonged to the same species as the flying squirrel, which Luffy had seen the day before. According to Law, these animals were Tilatus, kinds of insectivorous flying squirrels, which lived 55 million years ago. Unlike her, the two animals were far from being frightened by her presence. One of them even began to stare at her before moving slowly in her direction. Don't come near me, she ordered it, trying to scare him away by pretending to push it away with her foot. The animal, more curious than frightened, jumped on her and landed on her right arm. Surprised by this gesture, Shirahoshi froze and immediately closed her eyes when she felt it land on her. A few seconds passed before she decided to open them again. To her amazement, the animal was still on her arm and didn't seem to make any hostile gesture. Without knowing why, this reassured her a little. Slowly, she brought her hand to the animal's head, which sniffed it as soon as she was close to it. In this case, it didn't seem to mean any harm to her. "It's pretty cute as a critter," she admitted. "I feel like I'm holding some kind of fat hamster." It was then that Luffy reappeared with Law. "Come on, break time is over. It's time to go back," Luffy declared, trying to use a tone that didn't betray his anger. Due to his conversation with Law, as soon as it saw them coming, the animal left its place and fled immediately, with its compatriot, into a bush. They were so fast that neither of the two boys could notice their presence. "I'm coming," Shirahoshi declared, watching the two Tillajuses leave, almost with regret, before getting up and following us. However, a few minutes' walk later, the trio saw them again, running past them, accompanied by 3 other rodents, before continuing their run and scampering away. Behind them, a rabbit seemed to imitate them, as well as 3 Hyracotheriums. "What's wrong with them?" Luffy asked, who had nearly been knocked down by one of the horses. They're running from something," Law understood, watching the animals disappear into the vegetation of the forest. "What then?" asked Shirahoshi, a shrill cry which she recognized immediately and which gave her cold sweats in the back. Answered him, behind them. Turning around, they saw the silhouette of the being who had tried to kill them yesterday. Diatrima. As imposing as yesterday, the bird had advanced, easily pushing aside any obstacle in its path. Eventually, however, it stopped 5 yards from the trio and stared at them. To tell the truth, it seemed to be trying to identify them, as if it was the first time it had seen people of their species. For it, the main question he asked himself was whether it should consider them as prey or as potential enemies. Looking at it too, Law saw that it was smaller than the day before and had a sort of scratch on its neck that he hadn't noticed. In fact, he would have even sworn that this bird was not the one they had met. Isn't it the same bird as yesterday? He was frightened, but there are how many of these birds of misfortune on this island? However, an animal of this size should reign over a vast territory. Suddenly, a pebble flew through the air before hitting the bird's beak. Startled, he took a step back before glaring at Luffy angrily. "Get out," Luffy ordered it, stepping in front of Shirahoshi, who was shaking with fear. Screaming, the bird rushed towards the boy. Nevertheless, taking advantage of the advantage the area could give him, Luffy rushed behind a trunk. Hindered by the obstacle and unable to use its speed, the bird began to circle around the tree, while trying to grab Luffy. Having 2 more stones in his hands, Luffy aimed for its face. Feeling the projectiles hit it again, the Diatrima screeched. Taking advantage of it stopping, Luffy ran towards it, before giving it a powerful punch in the abdomen. Feeling the boy hitting it, the bird was surprised by this kind of attack, having never seen a creature behave like this. However, having a body made up of muscles, it barely felt Luffy's fist. Then raising its head, he let the tip of its beak fall down towards Luffy's skull. Jumping back, Luffy dodged its attack. Then, taking advantage that the bird had lowered its head, the boy raised his leg, before giving a powerful kick under the eye of the bird. This time, its waist went sideways, while Luffy's attack had more impact than his previous punch. "I got you." However, being even more enraged, the Diatrima aimed at him again, with a carnivorous gaze. However, before it could move, it felt someone kick one of his legs. Startled, it turned to see Law, with a piece of wood in his hand, which he held like a wooden sword. "Straw hat you," he shouted, starting to run around the bird. Imitating him, Luffy saw the bird remain motionless, not knowing what to do while the pair circled around it. Stumbling awkwardly, attempting to target someone, the Diatrima left a huge opening for Law to strike its right flank. However, no sooner did it see him take a step towards him than the bird targeted him and lifted its leg. In an instant, Law saw the foot of the Diatrima pulverize his branch, while the shock of the impact sent him flying backwards. Falling onto his back, he moaned in pain. Seeing him in a weak position, his opponent rushed towards him. "Trollo!" Luffy shouted, not trying to follow the monster. "Come back to fight." However, he felt Shirahoshi grab his arm while she was shaking in fear. "Hey, what are you doing?" Look," Shirahoshi stammered, pointing at something. Turning his head towards what she was trying to show him, Luffy gasped in surprise. A feline more than 1.5 meters high and 3 long had just appeared in front of him. It had sand-colored fur, dotted with misshapen black features. What characterized it the most at home was its 2 gigantic canines of more than 15 centimeters which protruded from its jaw. This detail allowed even a person like Luffy to identify this monster straight out of a science fiction movie. A saber-toothed tiger. Having also seen the feline, the diatrima had stopped and stared at the predator. Immediately, it screeched while the tiger growled. Seeming to stare at each other with hatred, the two animals ended up walking around each other. Seeing this, Law crawled on the ground before hiding behind a tree trunk. Unfortunately, looking at the future fight scene, he saw Luffy and Shirahoshi find themselves between the diatrima and the tiger. "Hey, what are you doing? Leave." Simply staring at the 2 animals, which were in front and behind him, Luffy grabbed Shirahoshi's arm before commanding her, "Let yourself be." What? At that moment the bird bent its legs, a sign that it was about to attack, and was at once imitated by the tiger. "We're going to get killed," wanted to shout Shirahoshi if her lips hadn't been paralyzed. The tiger was the first to rush at them. Jaws wide open, its 2 large canines were even more impressive. If it pierced their throats with these weapons, they would easily come out the other side of their necks, killing them in an instant. Imitating it, the diatrima also rushed towards the duo. Both of them, as fast as each other, came dangerously close to Luffy and Shirahoshi, just like death hovering above their heads. Still remaining perfectly calm, Luffy put his arm around Shirahoshi's waist before waiting for the last moment to jump. "Now," he shouted, leading Shirahoshi into her dive to the side. Then, hardly he touched the ground that Luffy heard a deaf noise caused by the impact of the 2 monsters, whose bodies had collided with violence. In fact, the shock was so violent that Luffy had the impression that he created a shock wave, which ejected him backwards. As he got up, he was able to witness the fight between the species, which represented the apogee of birds against that of felines. The kind of battle you don't see every day, even on TV. Right after the impact, the 2 creatures had recoiled in perfect synchronization and glared at each other. In this position, they seemed to examine the opponent they were going to fight down to the smallest detail. Height, weight, strengths, weaknesses, everything seemed to be observed and analyzed. The tiger was the first to attack again and swooped down on the bird, hoping to outrun it. The latter remained motionless and seemed to await the arrival of its adversary. Then, in an instant, it relaxed one of its legs to the maximum, the end of which hit the feline in the face. At first, Luffy felt like the fight had stopped and the second shock had stopped the 2 animals. However, during the second that followed, the ostrich ended up showing the superiority of its kick. Leaving the ground, the tiger made an impressive glide of at least 5 meters, before landing on its shoulder, accompanied by a noise that was anything but natural. The attack had knocked it out and he seemed to have passed out. Still, it could be happy to still be alive after taking such a powerful blow. In its place, a human would have died before he even hit the ground. In any case, the diatrima took advantage of its advantage to give it the coup de grace, and immediately plunged its hooked beak into its side. A stream of blood then spurted on the fur of the feline, which immediately changed from sand color to scarlet red, and the bird withdrew a piece of flesh from the body of its adversary. Despite being able to describe this scene as despicable, Luffy couldn't take his eyes off this epic battle. It had nothing to do with fighting between 2 humans. These 2 monsters were much stronger and more impressive than boxers, wrestlers, or other. Attending this fight was a completely different experience. Again, Luffy's mind was split with fear and excitement. Before he knew it, a counterattack suddenly began. The feline, recovering from the shock, began to struggle from the grip of its assailant, and fired a blow with one of its enormous paws, which cut into its face. Luffy wasn't sure but he thought he saw, in addition to the blood and the torn feathers, an eye of the animal which fell to the ground. Anyway, the diatrima had no choice but to step back and began shaking his sore, blood-covered head. The feline took the opportunity to get up and, despite its injury, jumped on it, claws sticking out of its front paws and mouth wide open. Before it had time to move, the bird's neck was punctured by two huge fangs. Moreover, under the weight of the tiger, it lost its balance and fell to the ground. For a few seconds, the tiger held it down by crushing its head with one of its paws, and the bird could only try to get out of its grip. Nevertheless, the feline positioned itself so that the bird's legs could not reach it, and because of its tiny arms, its opponent had no other way out. Little by little, it stopped moving before showing no more signs of life. It breathed its last when the fight had only started 3 minutes ago. The bird was dead, the vertebrae broken, and the trachea crushed. Is this a joke? Law wondered, who had also watched the entire fight. This diatrima was a real killing machine. Does that mean that this feline is even stronger than him? But who really reigns supreme here? Far from asking the question, the tiger lifted at this moment the body of the diatrima by biting it at the level of the neck. Then it walked towards Luffy and Shirahoshi, dragging its prey behind it. Seeing this, Luffy got into a fighting stance, ready to fight it, should the feline ever decide to attack it. Yet, barely giving him a look, the feline overtook him and continued to move forward. How? Luffy wondered, watching it go. When he was away, Law came back to Luffy, before affirming, "Once again, we were very lucky." "Why is he leaving?" Luffy asked. "He must have noticed that we were easy prey, right? He found something better than us to devour." Law understood, picking up his cap. Survival of the fittest. Obviously, that's how it works on this island. Hearing rapid, uncontrolled breathing, the two boys turned to Shirahoshi and saw her on the verge of tears and in shock. Seeing this titanic fight had horrified her, and she was surely close to fainting. Even Luffy was beginning to understand the danger of this island. He knew that many of his friends would never be able to fight those kind of monsters he had just seen fighting. Our situation is definitely getting worse day by day. If we continue to encounter even more dangerous animals than those we have already encountered, there is no chance that we will survive long here. At nightfall, in front of a campfire, Luffy was thinking about what Law had told him earlier that day about their friends. "I'm afraid they're all dead. What if it were true?" After all, even though several people had survived the accident, surviving on this island seems to be very complicated. Just crossing paths with one of the creatures it shelters means putting your life on the line in order to survive. Unsurprisingly, it's there too, Antoine declared, doing research on his computer. The saber-toothed tiger, also called Smilodon, is thought to have died out 10,000 years ago. No wonder, Luffy affirmed. Even I knew this creature, but the problem with him and the others is that they are still alive and well on this island. Straw Hat, do you realize how serious the situation is? Law asked him. To be matched against one of these creatures is like having as much chance of winning against them as of hitting the jackpot in the lottery 100 times in a row. We've been very lucky so far, but the wind is blowing. Surely turn around at some point. Then we can't count on another miracle to save us. We absolutely must get out of here before it's too late. What do you want me to tell you? Luffy questioned him. There is absolutely nothing we can do until the help is there, except to pray that they come as soon as possible. Anyway, I already know very well that all these creatures represent a danger for us. Feline hadn't arrived in time. The giant chicken would have killed you. That's why I repeat to you that in the worst case scenario, even if they survived the plane crash, the survivors must have already encountered these animals, and I already told you to, and soon will be devoured too. Shirahoshi whimpered suddenly. Looking at her, Luffy saw her start to sob again, noticing that she was even more depressed than yesterday. "Don't say that," Luffy retorted, while Law shot an annoyed look at the stewardess. "Rescue will be here soon. It's only a matter of hours." "Right, Trollo." "No idea," the boy confessed, shrugging. "You could support me, you pessimist." "I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. Even if they come here, what makes you think we'll still be alive when they get here?" The stewardess shouted. I remind you that it is impossible for us to survive on this damned island, and we don't even know if we can leave it. At this rate, we will never be able to return home." In the space of a few seconds, she had just perfectly described their situation and cast a chill among them. Lying on the ground, between Law and Shirahoshi, Luffy thought again about the life he had just left and started talking to his two companions. "School never interested me. That's why I've always been a troublemaker. Want is to take advantage of the present moment, while having fun. I did not work and the teachers did not like me very much. As soon as I entered high school, repetition or expulsion were always omnipresent. And it was only thanks to my friends that I was able to continue my school career." Thinking back to his friends, he continued. "Usopp, Chopper, Sanji, Nami, Kobe, Vivi, Kaya. They are my friends and I love spending time with them. Sometimes I felt like our world didn't change and was ungrateful to those who refused to follow the rules. That's what I sometimes thought, but never when I was with my friends. They, too, simply wanted to be free and not just become a pawn of society. Sometimes I ate delicious pizzas with them in Sanji's restaurant. Other times I would go to arcades to see Usopp beat anyone at any game. Or sometimes I skipped class with them to go to town. And then, even if I was only a stupid guy, the others helped me to study before each exam, and I worked to achieve them because I didn't want to be separated from them. For me, that life was enough thinking of his life outside of school," he affirmed. "And there was also my family, even though he can be grumpy and violent with me at times. My grandfather was always the one who raised me, and honestly, I enjoyed playing survivors with him and being alone in Sune Forest. It was in this kind of situation that I felt free. And with Ace, I trained to become stronger, because each of us has sworn to become stronger in order to become the next Ultimate X Fighter Master." At this moment, slightly turning her gaze towards him, Shirahoshi asked him in a small voice, "What is an Ultimate X Fighter?" "You do not know." Immediately, Luffy sat cross-legged before starting to smile. "Every year, in Japan, there is a big tournament that brings together the most powerful fighters in the country. These fighters, who have already participated in elimination fights, are called X-Fighters. The objective of this tournament is to elect the most powerful fighter in Japan, who will be able to obtain the title of X-Fighter Master. This kind of tournament, there is one in each country. And when all these tournaments have a winner, there is another tournament, bringing together all the world's winners. The winner of this tournament obtains the title of Ultimate X Fighter Master. So you want to win all these tournaments to get this title?" Shirahoshi asked. Looking excited, he declared, "No, when I was little, there was a man who participated in 4 world tournaments and won them all. He became the only man to have won the title of Ultimate X Fighter Master 4 times. His name was Gall D. Roger. Roger, I think I've heard of him before. So what's your goal?" Picking up his straw hat, Luffy stared at it, before recalling a moment in his life when someone entrusted it to him. "Luffy, when you realize your dream, you can return this hat to me. This may mean that I will see you as my equal. I promised someone that I will become the first person to win 5 world tournaments and get 5 Ultimate X Fighter Master titles. Yes, I will surpass Roger. Besides, Trao wants to become an X-Fighter." "Shut up," said Law. "What? That's right. It was a ridiculous dream I had when I was little. Currently, I am aiming for the best university to become a famous doctor. Becoming a fighter without a future doesn't interest me." Simply sticking his tongue out at him, Luffy then turned to Shirahoshi. "By the way, why did you become a flight attendant?" When I was little, I had poor health. I got that from my mother. Because of that, I couldn't benefit much from the outside world and I lived in my room for a long time. That's why I wanted to become a flight attendant. In order to discover the world, I wanted to show my father and my brothers that I could be independent. And above all, I wanted to tell them everything I could see around the world." Lowering her gaze, she said, "I never thought my first flight would end like this." "I think you're lucky," Luffy retorted. Smiling at her again, he said, "As soon as we can leave this island, you can tell your family about your adventures. I'm sure none of them have had an adventure like yours." Listening to him, Shirahoshi looked puzzled. Then, finally, she went back to bed while affirming, only on the condition that we leave this place alive. Hey, why are you so pessimistic? I almost got eaten by a bird and no one knows if the plane is really on this island. And if it does not exist, help will never come here. Holding back her tears, she finally whispered, Dad. Seeing her about to sob again, Luffy sighed. We're still alive. For me, that's the most important thing. And as long as we're alive, there will always be hope because you're annoying, Straw Hat ya. Hurry to sleep. Law suddenly interrupted. Hey, don't cut me off in mid-swing. Sleep. Mumbling, Luffy finally lay down. Then, a few seconds later, his two companions heard him begin to sleep, being far too preoccupied to imitate him. Shirahoshi stood with her eyes open as she repeated Luffy's words to herself. Hope, she didn't believe it at all. For her, the other passengers of the plane were already dead and they would soon be killed too. She didn't want to die. Nevertheless, she didn't feel able to bear any more dangers staying here. I don't want to live on this island, she sobbed. In that case, go away and die somewhere else. Law's voice advised her. Surprised, Shirahoshi turned to the boy, who had just put his cap on his face, to try to fall asleep. I don't think anyone else survived either, and I don't know how long we're going to have to stay here. However, I want to live, and for that, I'm ready to do anything to survive. Gripping his cap, he lifted it enough to be able to stare at Shirahoshi, while affirming, Straw Hat is an annoying, stupid guy. Nevertheless, I know he will refuse to give up living, even if death comes his way, in the form of a skeleton with a scythe. He begins his stupidity with his strength and determination. And that's why I'm staying with you. Fixing Shirahoshi with a stern look, he confessed. If it was just the two of us, I would have been gone a long time, leaving you behind. A person who spends their time crying, doing nothing useful, has no interest in me. Then he put his cap back on his head before finishing. If you understood what I just said, I think you know that there are two solutions. Either you refuse to face the dangers of this island and you decide to separate yourself from us. Decide to stop crying all day and you try to show us that you are ready to change to become someone we can rely on. Listening to him, Shirahoshi remained still and silent. Anyway, not waiting for an answer, Law fell asleep too. When he woke up, a ray of sunlight passing through the foliage of the trees dazzled him, forced Luffy to put his hand in front of his eyes to allow them to get used to the light. When it was done, he stretched his arms while yawning. I slept well. The worst part was that it was true. Despite the dangers on the island, nothing seemed to be able to stop Luffy from enjoying his sleep. And, again, if he managed to find something to eat, Luffy was ready to explore the island during the day. This time we will find the plane and our friends. Beside him, Law began to moan while he still slept. Less loud, Straw Hat. Hey, we have to go. The sun is already up. Law said weakly, turning around. 5 minutes. You haven't looked for anything to eat. I think I saw banana trees not far from here. Great, the breakfast. However, just as he was about to run to get the fruit, he quickly noticed that someone was missing. Hey, where's Wikoshi? Him, Law wondered. Seeing her nowhere, Luffy affirmed. She disappeared, faded away. Suddenly opening his eyes, Law sat up and looked around. Indeed, there was no longer the slightest trace of the stewardess, as if she had vanished. Where's that hottie? Then, remembering his words from the day before, he began to growl. That idiot. She's decided to make the wrong choice. What? What choice? Seeming pensive, Law ends up sighing before saying, Straw Hat. She decided not to follow us. Huh? What are you talking about? Why would she want to survive on this island alone? She doesn't want to survive. Law retorted. Think about it. Yesterday she was horrified and she thought we'd die before any potential help came here. This woman is the kind of person who would rather cut her life short than go through hell. Short her. We have to find her. Baka, do you know where she is? Anyway, I think it's already too late. What are you talking about? Luffy roared. We have to find her. It may not be too late. And why? A person who gives up living will never be useful to us. She's annoying. Immediately, he jumped back to avoid a punch, while Luffy tried to punch his face. Hey, what are you doing? You're the annoying one. Luffy roared. Then, leaving Law, he started running through the forest. Wikoshi, where are you? No answer. Where could she have gone? Thinking back to what she had said yesterday, when she started to panic after witnessing the fight between the Diatrima and the Smilodon, and what Law had just told her, Luffy started to panic slightly. She looked desperate. She wouldn't have left for herself. No, it's impossible. I had told him that there was always hope. Wikoshi, still no reason from him. Where did she go? Leaving, at this moment, the edge of the forest, Luffy found himself facing a small pond. Surprised to find himself in front of him, he almost put his foot in the water and sank at the same time. Phew, I got hot, he remarked, taking a step back. You definitely have to be careful here. Suddenly he fell silent, hearing a splashing sound in front of him. Raising his head, he saw Shirahoshi, naked as Eve, bathing in the middle of the pond. The water was only deep enough to hide his legs. The rest of her body he could see without difficulty, and, fortunately, she was back. When he arrived, she immediately turned in his direction and saw him staring at her with surprised eyes. Barely seeming to notice that she was naked, Luffy showed a big smile before affirming, "Finally found you. Glad to know you're okay." Just as a normal woman would have done, Shirahoshi immediately let out a cry and lowered her entire body into the water. Then, 2 new tears appeared in her eyes as she affirmed, "Sorry, Dad. I can't get married anymore." "Huh?" said Luffy, finally seeming to notice the nudity of the stewardess. The boy bowed before her. "Sorry, go away, please," Shirahoshi begged, blushing in shame. Turning around, Luffy positioned himself behind the nearest tree trunk. Not seeing him anymore, Shirahoshi asked. "Blue," Luffy said, "why are you here? Why am I here? It's more up to me to ask you. What you have just done is not very prudent. You left without telling anyone. That's why I was trying to tell you, and since yesterday you were pretty terrified of having to stay on this island. I thought that. Were you worried about me?" Shirahoshi wondered. "Huh, of course we are. Aren't we friends? Friends, but I thought you found me annoying and unhelpful." "It's true," Luffy agreed. "I am annoyed to hear you cry all the time. Nevertheless, that certainly does not mean that I want to see you die. Our adventures." Surprised, Shirahoshi remained frozen. Then suddenly she started crying again. Hearing her sobbing, Luffy asked, What did I say? I'm sorry." The stewardess apologized, trying to wipe away her tears with her hands. It's just that I thought you hated me, and I'm really sorry for being so dumb." Trying to calm her sobs, she said, "Thank you, Luffy-san." "Thanks? Why? It's thanks to you that I'm still alive," she reminded him. "If you hadn't taken me out of the Diatrima's nest, who knows what he could have done to me. And then, yesterday, Law confessed to me that he had nothing to do with my rescue, and that I only had to thank you. That's why I say thank you. Thank you for allowing me to continue to live." "Huh, you're welcome. I'm amazed that selfish Law behaves like this. I hate to take credit that doesn't belong to me." A voice growled, "And I forbid a guy like you to call me selfish." Arriving at the pond, Law ended up sitting against a tree trunk and turned his back to Shirahoshi. "You stupid woman. Yesterday, however, I thought I had been clear with you. I thought my little speech would boost your will to live. And, currently, I find you here, bathing in a lake, while unknowingly ignoring any dangers that may surround you. It's just, I wanted to wash up, and, as you were sleeping, I didn't want to annoy you waking up. I'm sorry, idiot," Law growled. "If you really want to thank Luffy, don't ever do that again. Huh? He almost died saving you like this. The most ungrateful gesture you can do to him, and to simply die in the most stupid way. I admit that I don't like you at all, and that you are a real nuisance. However, as a future doctor, my role is to ensure the survival of people and not to let them die when I can save them." Turning his gaze back a little, he said, "If you're willing to survive, I'll help you stay alive." Again, tears streamed down Shirahoshi's cheeks as she redoubled her efforts to wipe them away. Thank you very much. I want to help you too. And that's why I'm ready to do my best to find the plane and all the people on it. Luffy-san is right. We have to fight while there is still hope." Hearing that, Luffy laughed. "Shuhahui, that's right. In that case, get dressed. Let's get some food and let's go." But as he stood up, Shirahoshi suddenly let out a cry of surprise. "What's going on?" Luffy wondered. Look, at this moment, an object thrown by the young woman lands between Law and Luffy. What? Wondered the male duo. It was a bottle. A small, half-full plastic bottle with a familiar label. It was floating on the surface of the water. Shirahoshi told them. Law began. "It's from the plane," confirmed the stewardess. "The label is the same as the bottles we distribute to passengers." Taking a few seconds to understand what that meant, Luffy ended up jumping for joy upon hearing this confirmation. If this bottle was here, it meant that the plane was not far away or that someone who was inside had passed by here. In any case, this proved that they were not alone on this island. Finally a clue. And to think that you thought it was already a miracle that we were still alive. Luffy stated, walking around the lake in hopes of finding another clue to the possibility of the plane's presence in the around. "At one point, I almost believed you. Bakiero. Of course, that could already be considered like a miracle." Law retorted. "We were alive and had no serious injuries." Also, he suddenly stopped, both talking and walking, just like Luffy and Shirahoshi, seeing an incredible sight. A trail made by something, apparently very large and extremely heavy, cut the forest in two while having decapitated and knocked down all the trees in its path. The road that separated us from the other part of the forest was at least 8 meters wide and several hundred meters long. But what happened here? Luffy wanted to know, examining what was left of the tree trunks. "I feel like a herd of bulldozers went through here and smashed everything in their path." Shirahoshi replied with a huge cry of joy and pointing at something. "I knew it. Mr. Dalton was the most competent person I knew." Luffy didn't even hear the end of his sentence, so he was happy. Tears of joy had even flowed down her cheeks. At the very end of the trail, the trio could see the object that had been responsible for the deforestation of this area. The culprit was none other than a plane. Their plane, the one Luffy was in with all his friends. Even from a distance, he could see that there was no trace of the slightest explosion and was not charred. Truth be told, he was still in one piece. He made his emergency landing. Law observed. Without wasting a second, Luffy immediately rushed, followed by the boy and Shirahoshi, towards the huge flying machine, which didn't seem to him to have had too much damage. On the other hand, Luffy quickly noticed that there was no living soul around him, as if all the passengers had abandoned the plane or that a terrible tragedy had taken place during his absence. Nobody. Where are they? When Luffy had arrived at the foot of the device, he put his hands in the shape of a funnel in front of his mouth and began to scream. "Is anyone there? Hey!" No response reached his ears. The place was well and truly deserted. "Ahoy! Can you hear me?" he continued. "Is there anyone here?" Still no response. To believe that all had been gone for a little while. However, the trio were able to see several clues that showed them that there had indeed been other survivors. "There's been a campfire here," Luffy remarked, crouching down next to a remnant of cindered pieces of wood. Putting his hand on it, he couldn't resist showing a grimace of displeasure, discovering that the ashes were much too cold for the fire to be extinguished during the day. So it had been on for more than a day, and since there seemed to be no one around, Luffy was beginning to wonder if his friends had left to explore the island. If so, they've dug their own grave. So many easy-to-kill prey would be a real boon for any predator that crosses their path. Here, there are empty cans and water bottles left, Shirahoshi adds, seeing the trash lying on the ground. Given the quantity, it is certain that many people were here. This is good news. Only Law still had his usual crestfallen expression, despite knowing that other people were alive. "And well, what else do you have? You know you're annoying from sulking all day long," Luffy remarked. "Look," he exclaimed, nodding his head. On the ground, between the cans and the plastic bottles, Luffy saw something, which made all the hope he had just got when he found the plane disappear. It's a hand," Shirahoshi stammered, falling backwards. Considering the amount of blood around it, it wasn't a plastic fake. Just by looking at her appearance, Luffy saw that she had been violently severed from the rest of her owner's body. Moreover, his skin was now a purple color, while the blood around him was no longer scarlet. It didn't take a genius to realize that the camp had come under attack, and that hand had been there for a while. Besides, look at the state the plane is in. Law advised them. Immediately, Luffy and Shirahoshi looked at the flying craft. At first, nothing seemed suspicious to them. However, Shirahoshi ended up finding that he had received several damages here and there. Traces of impacts had formed as if a titan had hit the craft with his fists. There were far too many for the landing to be solely responsible for. "It's damaged," Shirahoshi remarked. "Me, I find it normal," Luffy retorted. "He landed in the middle of the forest. The trees and the ground must be responsible for the damage. There are also impacts above the plane." Law retorted. "I don't think it was the landing that damaged the aircraft. It's something else." Then, walking towards the plane, he stopped in front of what looked like a huge inflatable object, which had been completely deflated. "An evacuation slide," Shirahoshi remarked. Of the two that had been deployed at each end of the aircraft, only one was still intact. The other lay, deflated, in front of the trio. "He was punctured," Law remarked, seeing a huge gash. "Normally, even if it was used to evacuate passengers, it should have been still intact." On top of that, he knelt in front of the remains of the slide and showed them some red stains caused by a liquid that was familiar to Luffy. "There's blood. If we follow logic, it's obvious that one or more predators got here before us." "Damn it," Luffy yelled, racing towards the undamaged evacuation slide. "What are you doing?" Law questioned him. "Do you think we need to check if the others are hiding inside the plane?" Luffy replied, starting to climb. But part of his hopes were shattered when he saw new puddles of dried blood staining the second slide as well. But what happened here? Finally, when he managed to climb aboard the aircraft, a sad scene appeared before him. A cyclone seemed to have destroyed the interior of the plane. Bags, objects of all kinds, and food covered the floor, which had become, here and there, scarlet red, just like some seats. Even Luffy's room had never been so tidy as this place. Given the extent of the damage, the turbulence that had shaken the plane could not, on its own, explain this scourge. "What happened?" Shirahoshi asked, arriving in turn. "Is there really no one?" Law questioned. It's impossible," Luffy declared, running into the plane. "Ace, Nami, Usopp, where are you?" When he got to the restroom and found it empty along with the rest of the plane, he fell to his knees and began to lose hope. The friends, where are you? Are they all dead after being attacked by several predators?" At that moment, he heard Shirahoshi scream in fear. What happened to him? What's the matter with you?" Luffy huffed, immediately running towards her. She was with Law in the pilot room. What Luffy saw entering the small room made him stop short, while his eyes opened wide. On his seat, according to his uniform, was the body of the pilot. To see the appearance of his inert body, he was dead. Eyes wide open, he seemed to be staring at them. However, all that moved on his body was nothing but flies and maggots, which covered him and began to accentuate the putrefaction of the corpse. In terms of dress, he still had his pilot's cap on his head and a white uniform, with a navy blue tie. He also wore pants of the same color. A corpse, Luffy wondered. No doubt about the fact of his death. Law affirmed, holding his nose. The smell escaping from the body of the deceased was so nauseating. "Mr. Dalton," Nadia cried, in tears. "It's not possible. How could he have died? Something must have hit him during the crash and killed him instantly." Luffy affirmed. No law contradicts him. It's more serious than that. Look at his abdomen. A huge bloodstain covered the pilot's shirt at this point. In the middle of it was a wound. Rather fine. It seemed, however, very deep. Anyway, deep enough to puncture the organs, which were under the victim's uniform. "I can't confirm for sure, but I believe he was stabbed to death." Law stated. "He was stabbed," Luffy repeated. But who could have done such a thing? Shirahoshi wanted to know. Besides, why kill him when he was the only person who could pilot the device? Stabbing him to remove any chance we had of getting out of here on our own. All I can say is that he was killed by another passenger on the plane, Law declared, and that the murderer is surely on the run outside. But where? Luffy questioned him. And why is there no one here? I'm not a diviner, he replied. So I can't answer your two questions. Maybe they went after the assassin. Unless the latter managed to form a group and took it into his head to eliminate the rest passengers. We can only speculate. Luffy looked again at the body of the deceased. Could someone from our school have done such a heinous thing? Suddenly, something entered his field of vision. One of the pilot's hands had fallen on the control post, wedging between the two. A strange bracelet. But this bracelet, it's that of. Removing the pilot's hand from the object, Luffy immediately grabbed it. Apart from the bloodstains on it, the bracelet was all brown except for the part that had what looked like a small compass. To his knowledge, only one person had this kind of bracelet. Nami, it's her bracelet. What? Law questioned. This bracelet belongs to Nami. Luffy told him. Wherever she goes, she always has it with him. What was he doing there? And his owner, where is she? At that moment, Law noticed, in turn, something interesting on the ground. Straw Hat, you come see. The boy exclaimed, bending down to pick up the object in question. As he got closer, Luffy could see that he was holding a video camera in his hand. A camera, but what is it doing there? I don't know, his comrade replied, trying to make it work. But maybe she could give us some answers. The screen then lights up. She's still walking. He told her, let's just hope she. Luffy suddenly grabbed it, snatching it from his hands. Hey, Law exclaimed, surprised by her gesture. What's gotten into you? I don't know why, but I feel that she witnessed the carnage and that she will teach us a lot. Luffy assured him. Displaying the list of videos stored in the device, he began to play them. So Departure Day, Guan Tour 2. There's none that match. Try the last one. Law advised him. She who is called a Luffy complied and an image appeared. That of a group of students surrounding a huge campfire. Many had faces that were familiar to Luffy and Law. It's the others. Look, I see Kuina, Hachai, and Romeo. Some of them wore bandages around their heads or arms. A sign that the plane had landed quite brutally. If anyone managed to film that scene, then the carnage happened long after the plane had landed. Law remarked, in any case, it's exactly the same landscape as the one outside. A new face appeared and seemed to stare at the camera. From the way the camera was moving to get a good shot of his face, Law was sure it was the cameraman. It's Johnny, Luffy affirmed, trying to get his sunglasses to fit properly on his nose. As they cracked, the boy began to move his lips, but no sound could be heard. What is he saying? Shirahoshi asked, realizing that he was beginning to speak. Luffy immediately turned up the volume so they could hear him. After the plane crash and the emergency landing, we are now stuck on an island covered in lush jungle. Unfortunately, we are forced to stay there until rescuers can bring us back safe and sound. Safe at home. In any case, I would like to make a video of the accident to immortalize this unplanned stopover. Suddenly, another face appeared in the picture. Yosaku, Johnny's best friend. We are on day one of our adventure, and we can consider ourselves true adventurers who feel no fear. It's true, we are brave warriors. At that moment, the sound of a bird could be heard, frightening the duo, who began to scream in fear. Church. What was that? Eventually, they spotted what looked like a small toucan, hovering over the area. Phew, it's only a bird. Yosaku gloated. Who are these two jerks? Law asked. It's Johnny and Yosaku. They're part of the Kendo Club. They're Zoro's friends, Roronoa. As the video continued, Johnny then walked over to a group of high school kids. Immediately, Luffy recognized the faces of Nami, Sanji, Vivi, Kaya, and Usopp. Among them, Vivi and Usopp were the only ones with some bandages. But overall, they were all unscathed. Passing by them, Johnny stopped in front of another person who was lying on the ground. Aniki, your take on the situation, please. Zoro growled, opening one eye. Starting to yawn, he finally said, I'm just waiting for help to come get us. You seem in a bad mood. It's been more than a week since I've been able to drink a drop of alcohol. Today, I should have been able to drink the reserve of sake waiting for me at home. And instead, I am forced to wait here, knowing that this island has nothing resembling a bottle of liquor. As usual, you're still only thinking about alcohol, Sanji remarked while starting to light a cigarette. You're just a drunk mosshead. Straightening up, Zoro stared at the blonde. Do you have a problem with me, Cook? I don't want to hear comments from a perv like you. Feeling a vein forming on his forehead, Sanji stood up, along with Zoro, as the two boys touched their foreheads and stared at each other, while creating flashes with their eyes. However, before they could fight, two fists hit them and knocked them to the ground. Seeing them falling in front of him, a boy, small in stature, couldn't help but be frightened by Nami's gesture. Nami is scary. She's always like that when she's in a bad mood, Chopper. Usopp whispered. Do you have a problem? Nami asked, staring at them. No, nothing. Sitting back down, Nami heard Vivi say to her. Nami said, you should calm down a bit. How could I? We're on a lost island and we don't know when help will come to our rescue. Honestly, despite our situation, I think we are lucky. Usopp retorted. We could have all died during this flight, but there are still several people missing like Miro or Luff. Silent the boy seemed concerned. No one knows where Luffy is. Don't worry, Usopp. Haya tried to comfort him. I'm sure he's fine. Of course he's fine, Sanji affirmed. Starting to smoke again, he declared. That guy, only old age can kill him. Knowing him, if he's lost on this island, I'm sure he must be having fun playing adventurer. I bet you, when we see him again, he will come to us with a big smile before telling us everything he has experienced. Vivi began to chuckle. She said, Luffy-san is like that. He is oblivious and often thoughtless. I don't really know, Nami confessed. Yes, Luffy knows how to find food and doesn't need to live with much comfort. May feature. Hearing all this, Shirahoshi affirmed. It seems your friends know you well, Luffy said. MPPPFFFFHHH. Luffy said, puffing out his cheeks. They always say I need a babysitter. It is. Law affirmed. You won't be able to survive a day if no one is there to watch you. Hey, at that moment, a person came to Luffy's friends, running, with a huge smile. It's Ace. Luffy exclaimed, happy to see him, too, alive. On the other hand, he immediately noticed the band-aid on his forehead. He was therefore injured during the accident. But, looking at his happy face, it was nothing more than a distant memory. I have great news, he announced. Go ahead, impress us. Yosaku challenged him. The radio's fixed. I heard they were calling for help. He told them, we'll be leaving here soon. At the same time, the pilot of the plane appeared in the image with a megaphone in his hand. It didn't take long for Luffy to recognize it. He was the one who was stabbed, right? Luffy asked. Shirahoshi could only nod in agreement. I repeat, Dalton announced into the megaphone. There is no longer any need to worry. We are currently in radio contact with the emergency services. You will soon be back on French territory. The faces of the people whom we could glimpse immediately displayed big smiles. Yes, we are saved. We are going to leave this island of misfortune. Luffy then saw Usopp, Yosaku, and Sanji clapping their hands, while Kaya threw herself around Nami's neck to the point of strangling her. Radio contact. Law repeated, frowning slightly. They were able to do it that fast. It's really strange. So everyone else has been rescued, and we're the only ones left behind. Luffy muttered. They abandoned us. Idiot. He insulted him. If you used your brain, you would quickly guess that it is simply impossible. If it had happened as you say, explain to me the carnage outside and inside the plane. And then, there is still the murder of the pilot. In any case, seeing his body, the emergency services could have at least buried him. Not to mention that I doubt that they left when the others must have announced to them our disappearance. It's strange. At that moment, Ace began to look at the forest. Seeing him do this, Vivi walked towards him before questioning him. Are you okay, Ace-san? I'm thinking of my stupid little brother. The boy confessed. I know perfectly well that he is fine, but I can't help worrying about him. Staring at the forest, he declared. As soon as help arrives, I will go get him myself. The image of the campfire then disappeared. Then, the video was cut before resuming. This time, Johnny was among the people of a large crowd, which had gathered in front of a strange building, resembling a bunker. What is that? Luffy asked. What is that? Johnny asked the person in front of him. Two students walked a bit away from the plane and found this bunker. They managed to open the doors and went inside. Apparently they found a lot of weapons, like swords. What? Johnny wondered, trying to see inside the bunker. Nevertheless, several teachers had stood in front of the doors of the bunker and ordered the students to step back. Seeing the video stop again, Law looked surprised. A bunker, weapons. He said that place was near the plane. Luffy remarked, "But it's impossible," Shirahoshi affirmed. "Why would a bunker full of weapons be here? We'll see if it exists or not," assured Law. "First, let's find out why no one is still here." A video resumed again. It was now dark. Several people were lying on blankets on the ground and seemed to be sleeping. In front of the campfire, only one person was still awake. Ace. "Are you okay, Ace Aniki?" Johnny questioned, advancing towards him. "It's nothing," the boy assured, glancing towards the forest. Seeming to be trying to see a figure through the trees, he finally sighs, before affirming, "One day, this idiot will be responsible for my death, because of the stress he causes me. Don't you think he might be in danger?" Starting to smile, Ace retorted, "Even in the face of Satan, I'm sure Luffy will get through this. It's true that he gets himself into a lot of trouble, but in truth, Luffy is a very lucky person." Laughing, another boy walked over to the pair. "I have always respected the bond that bound you to your brother, Ace." "Ao." Ace wondered, recognizing his friend. Walking towards the forest, Ao stared at the darkness between the trees, before affirming, "This place is very gloomy. However, it looks safe to me." "Hey, Ace, if you want, I can accompany you and we can inspect the surroundings to see if we can find your brother." "What?" Johnny frightened. "Are you crazy? You don't know what can be in this forest. Given the commotion caused by the plane landing on this island, the animals must have already been aware of our arrival. If they haven't come, that means they're scared. Just say there's no animals around. And now that the teachers aren't around to check on us, we can inspect the place." Staring at him while thinking of his brother, Ace ended up nodding his head before getting up. However, before he could say anything, he thought he saw a figure appear behind Ao. Hearing a growl behind him, Ao turned around. Before he could say anything else, a huge pair of jaws shot out of the vegetation and grabbed him. Screaming in fear, Johnny backed away, while Luffy and the others could see Ao getting stuck between the jaws of a huge animal, which was now lit by the glow of the campfire. "What are these monsters?" Luffy asked, seeing 3 animals, bigger than a van, coming out of the forest. These creatures looked like wolves, but with the build of huge grizzly bears. They were covered with a short gray fur and had a kind of mane on the top of the skull and the nape of the neck. A most striking detail was their huge heads. They were almost disproportionate compared to the rest of their bodies. Their jaws alone measured at least a meter. The one holding Ao in its jaw increased the pressure on the unfortunate boy's body. It only took 2 seconds to hear the first sounds of his bones breaking and to see the boy being cut in 3. "Ao!" Ace yelled, staring at what was left of the boy falling to the ground. Falling to his buttocks, Johnny shuddered in fear. Seeing him do this, Ace ran towards him before taking his arm. "Let's go quick," the boy shouted, urging him to his feet. "Everyone, wake up." The carnage began at that moment. Those who were still awake and warned by Ace's cries fled towards the plane or into the forest. Seeing the silhouette of the newcomers, the latter, noting that they had just come across a veritable feast, began to pursue them. The high school students who were, at this moment, still half awake saw with horror the enormous creatures rushing at them. Jaws wide open, Andrew Sarchis, Law identified, spotting one of them grabbing a poor high school girl's arm. It is a mammal whose body was 5 meters long. Like the crocodile, it has a head whose length is almost a third of its size. It is known to have been the largest carnivorous land mammal. There are 40 million years old. Despite its resemblance to canids, it is in the same family as rhinos. Are you kidding? That thing is supposed to be a rhinoceros. Next to it, I find the horned animal almost as harmless as a lamb. As the carnage spread behind them, Ace and Johnny walked towards their friends, who began to wake up. "What's going on?" Nami asked, rubbing her eyes. "We're being attacked," Johnny shouted. Chopper wondered, looking behind them. "Church. Monsters. What are these things?" Kaya asked, standing up. Taking her hand, Usopp got to his feet in record time, before running towards the plane. No time to ask this kind of question. Let's take refuge on the plane. Unable to acquiesce, the others began to follow them, and were joined, at the foot of the plane, by other people who also began to run towards the machine. They were nevertheless chased by the three creatures, who already had their muzzles covered with the blood of their victims. They're coming. But what are these huge beasts? Run instead of talking. Trying to reach them, Vivi suddenly tripped over a rock and fell to the ground. 10. Sanji shouted, running towards her. Heading up with difficulty, the girl heard footsteps behind her. Frightened, she turned to see an Androsarchus running towards her. "And they church," she cried. However, trying to hit the monster with a sword, someone managed to stop the creature. "What? T-Bone Sensei?" The young girl wondered. "Even though I didn't think it would help us, I'm glad we were able to find weapons in that bunker," the professor affirmed. Nevertheless, starting to roar, the Androsarchus in front of him rushed at him and gave him a powerful headbutt. Feeling himself falling to the ground, the adult nevertheless managed to grab hold of the Androsarchus' head to prevent it from moving. "Sensei," Sanju shouted, seeing him in bad shape. "Go," the man ordered, continuing to hold the monster back as long as possible. "Go, now." Still frozen, Vivi finally felt Sanji take her hand, before running towards the plane. "But, Sanji-kun." At that moment, the duo heard screams of agony behind them. Closing their eyes, they understood that T-Bone had just sacrificed himself to allow them to live. "Damn it," cried Sanji, seeing a crowd of people in front of the two evacuation slides. As they tried to climb it, to return to the plane, Sanji grabbed Vivi and carried her in his arms. Then, using his powerful legs, he jumped over the crowd before landing on the evacuation slide and starting to climb it. Being among those who reached the plane first, Johnny proceeded to film the ascent of the other teenagers. Behind them, one of the three creatures continued to pursue them using the escape slide. Passing one after the other in front of Johnny, Luffy could see, among the survivors, Ace, Nami, and Yosaku entering the device. Then, Sanji and Vivi joined them. Finally, having been pushed during their ascent to the device, Usopp and Kaya could be seen in the opening of the door and begin to take cover. Behind them, a high school student with red hair arrived in turn. Trying to take refuge inside the plane, the trio didn't see the head of the Androsarchus appear behind them. Before they could figure it out, the monster closed its jaws on them and managed to grab hold of the red-haired boy's left arm and Kaya's right shoulder. "And they church," Kaya cried, feeling its huge fangs dig into her flesh. "Kaya," cried Usopp. Still holding her hand, Usopp felt the monster begin to slide down the slide, taking his two prey with him. "Leave her," Usopp ordered it, feeling himself being carried away with them. "Usopp," Kaya could only say, as the pain paralyzed her. However, before he could take them with it, the Androsarchus heard the red-haired boy order it. "You better let me go." Then, before giving it time to react, he reached into his pockets and pulled out a small bunch of keys. Despite having an arm trapped in the huge jaws, the boy managed to move his good arm enough to direct the ends of his keys towards the creature's eye. Immediately, the sharp object punctured the Androsarchus' eye, causing him to let out a huge roar of pain. Kid, Law wondered, recognizing him. Opening its jaws before dropping down the slide, the monster released Kid and Kaya. Dropping to her knees, the blonde put her hand on her shoulder, while huge bloodstains could be seen. "Kaya, shit," Luffy began. "What's going on? Why aren't these beasts afraid of the campfire?" Shirahoshi wanted to know, terrified, too, by the carnage. Isn't that a good way to ward off wild beasts, though? Contrary to what we are led to believe, mammals are very curious when they don't recognize what they see. The flames must have drawn them here instead of scaring them away. Law explained to her. Really, yes, there are African tribes who never make fire because people know it might attract lions. Animals are afraid of fire only when they know it can kill them. Never seen before. That's why they don't dread it. Close the doors, the co-pilot ordered, seeing another animal trying to climb aboard the plane. But there are still people who are outside. A professor clarified. Do it, otherwise we're all dead. Nodding in spite of themselves, a few people finally complied and decided to close the doors. When the doors closed, the survivors only heard the sighs of relief from some people and the cries of others. I want to go home. Acilia, are you there? Answer me. Why were those beasts there? But the most sinister was surely the noises coming from outside. Seeing that they had been abandoned, the high school students who were still outside were shouting or begging for someone to help them. For his part, the Andrewsarchus, who was going up the slide, had managed to reach the door of the plane. From inside, the survivors felt the tremors he produced as he banged his head against the sheet metal. Will the door hold up? We're all going to die. Don't worry, all right. There's the radio. Help will definitely be there tomorrow morning. Someone said to calm them down. It's true, Shirahoshi affirmed. They have already made contact with them. Sounds of struggle were then heard. Sir, get off me right now. Dirty liar. How could you lie to us? What's going on? Nami asked, rushing with Vivi and Sanji towards a group of students. Right in the middle of the crowd, Ace grabbed the pilot of the plane by the collar of his uniform and lifted him up. The radio. Ace roared. You lied to us about the radio. Johnny slipped through the students who had gathered around the assailant and arrived at the door of the pilot room, which was wide open. That was how Luffy and the others could see inside the room. The radio had entered the camera's field of vision, but, like the rest of the control panel, everyone noticed that it was in poor condition and probably unusable. But then, the message. Luffy began. You lied to us. You never contacted the emergency services. Did you? Luffy's brother continued. Let go of me. Dalton repeated again, trying to break free from his assailant's grip. Why did you lie to us saying that the radio was fixed? Listen, I really had no choice. It was the only way not to cause panic and to be able to. Do you really believe that's an excuse? At that moment, a knock at the plane's door startled everyone, while one of the monsters still tried to enter. Looking towards the door, praying that it wouldn't give in, everyone was startled when they heard a strange noise next. Turning around again, they saw Dalton stop struggling as he convulsed, surprising Ace. His mouth opened and a trickle of blood escaped. Weakly reaching out to the boy, he pleaded in a small voice. Help me, Ace. What did you do to her? A girl asked, surprised at the turn of events. But nothing, Luffy's brother assured, letting go of the pilot's collar with a trembling hand. The man put his hands on the wound, which had just been made to him, at the level of the abdomen. He then took a few awkward steps backwards and fell backwards onto a seat. Who killed him? The professor shouted. It's Ace. It can only be Ace. I didn't do anything. I don't have a weapon. Then, hearing a new shock, followed by a bestial growl, all the high school students cried out in fear. This monster is going to enter the plane. This time for sure. We're all going to die. Me, I'm leaving here. To go where? I remind you that there are those monsters outside. That's when the video stopped and the screen went black.